everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders, and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety disorders. Thank you all, everybody, for joining me for today's very fun episode. This is an interview episode. I was able to have Dr. Ran Littman on to talk about Relationship OCD. I'll tell you a little bit about him in just a moment, but this was a really fun episode where we go over what Relationship OCD is, and we go over a couple different examples of what it might look like and what treatment can look like within Relationship OCD. And Dr. Littman did a fantastic job explaining what it is, what treatment looks like, and different ways to approach it in a more functional way. We also answer a little bit of a question from somebody. Someone sent in a question related to Relationship OCD, so Dr. Littman was able to go over that, at least in part, with us on the podcast. So why don't I just introduce Dr. Littman, and we'll jump into that interview here. So Dr. Ran Littman is a clinical psychologist who specializes in providing online treatment for OCD with a particular focus on relationship OCD. He is a member of a clinical research team dedicated to the development, advancement, and accessibility of treatment for relationship OCD. Additionally, Ran contributes as a blogger to the Psychology Today magazine, sharing insights on understanding, discerning, and coping with relationship OCD. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Dr. Ran Littman. All right, Ran Littman, thank you so much for joining us for the podcast today to talk about ROCD.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you for having me. Very glad to join you for this discussion today.
Absolutely. Well, I reached out to you. You have a blog over at Psychology Today talking all about relationship OCD and the ins and outs of it. And I thought that you'd be a great person to have on to talk about just what ROCD is. I know that we get a lot of questions on the Fearcast about relationship OCD, how to work with their partner who has ROCD. What does an individual do when they have ROCD? How do they deal with their partner? All sorts of different questions. And I thought it'd be great to have someone who has a unique and specialized interest in ROCD to kind of go over treatment, go over kind of what it is, and I think more importantly, what is the mindset that someone ought to develop or foster or build as they want to work on and overcome their ROCD. Mm-hmm. So I assume you'll be able to fix just everybody. Is that kind of? I think that's why you're on today.
Yeah, well, probably not everybody, but right. I sure hope that, our talk could be of value to people struggling with ROCD. And as you and I know, because we meet many of those people, this can be a really, really difficult condition to cope with and lead people to great suffering. And let's hope that we can, help and provide some value in some way.
Absolutely. Well, I guess first, could you tell us a little bit about? I know I didn't ask you this before, but tell me a little bit about how and why you got into this interest of ROCD. There's a lot of different subtypes within the OCD world. What brought you to the ROCD focus?
Well, actually, I worked and I'm still working with Dr. Danny Derby and Professor Gay Duran, which are two of the main figures who started exploring and publishing studies and treatment protocols about ROCD. So, I first of all started learning a lot from them, who engage in several projects, such as writing a book chapter about ROCD and developing or extending treatment protocol about ROCD. And the more I delved into it, the more I discovered how many people, both clients and therapists, are not sufficiently aware of the condition, which is, of course, true to say about many manifestations of OCD, mostly the non-stereotypical ones. We know that this is a disorder which is highly underdiagnosed. But if this is even more correct when we're talking about ROCD. Okay, and I think that one of the things I realize at this certain point is like let's try to delve deeper into this. Let's try to have more people aware that this is a thing, right? And I'm sure that you encountered this too, Kevin. That I mean, so often we see people come to the clinic with this thing they've been struggling with for months and sometimes for years, and at a certain point, I'm like, this sounds like ROCD, and like, what is ROCD? And then we tell them a little about it, and suddenly it feels like a huge burden came off their chest. It doesn't mean that there's a long way to go, but I heard so many times from people the sentence like, wow, so this is a thing, and this is a thing that people know of, and this is a thing that could be treated, and hey, other people cope with it. It's not just me who is whatever. Okay? So I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Yeah, I always find it interesting to find out how someone gets into their particular kind of avenue within the OCD or even just the mental health realm. So I appreciate your sharing. So with all that said, tell us a little bit about what relationship OCD is. So there's there's a lot of different, and I'll interject from time to time, but I guess lead the way. Tell us what ROCD is.
Sure. So people with ROCD are typically occupied with all kinds of questions and deliberations regarding their relationship. For example, questions like, are we compatible enough? Is this the right person for me? Is this the right I want to see myself with 20 years from now? Is this, does this feel like a solid basis for a good relationship? Sometimes those questions would focus of my, experiences in the relationship. Do I feel in love enough? Are my feelings for my partner strong enough? Do I think about them often enough? And sometimes those questions would be directed towards the partner, like, is he intelligent enough for me? Is she sociable enough? Will he be someone I could count on? Will she be a good mother? Would I be able to be happier with someone else? And so on and so forth. Now, the important thing to understand about ROCD, that those questions I just mentioned and many others are not unusual or unnatural in relationship. I mean, I think that many of us who've been into a relationship can emphasize with those questions or similar ones. Right? So for the most part, ROCD is not about the questions themselves or the content people are occupied with, but the way they manifest. For people with ROCD, such questions appear much, much, much more frequently. They're usually very distressing and accompanied by feelings such as anxiety, distress, urgency, sometimes shame of those thoughts and feelings. Right? And people with ROCD tend to have or to dedicate lots of meaning to having those thoughts. Meaning, like, what does it mean if I doubt my relationship so much? What does it mean if I focus on aspects in my partner that I dislike, and so on and so forth? And in the more extreme cases, the preoccupation with those thoughts and deliberations can really, cause great suffering, and even change people's life completely. They can be engaged in those thoughts for hours per day, in some cases all day long.
Right. As you went into the explanation about how these questions aren't you didn't use these terms. These questions aren't that crazy, but it's the way that they showed up. I was literally writing down a question to ask later of how do you differentiate this between between someone who has ROCD and someone who's asking good questions about whether or not this is going to be a successful relationship or whether or not there is a good match between the two people in that partnership. So I think you answered that without me even asking the question. So perfect. But yeah, I think the emphasis on the amount of time that they're there, the intensity with which they are felt, the amount of time that they're taking away from the individual and from the relationship, that kind of helps it to graduate into this category of ROCD, as opposed to just being regular questions that people ask about the relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe if I could just add to that, because it's an important question that also comes up a lot in therapy, we have to first of all have in mind that ROCD is not a mini OCD, it's not a gentle OCD, it's not some friendlier version of OCD, and it's not a term that clinician chose in order to describe clients who are preoccupied with some questions. In order to refer to someone as suffering from OCD, we have to diagnose them as suffering from OCD, which means, according to the DSM-5, 3 criteria. They have to experience obsessions, which are intrusive, unpleasant, unwanted thoughts. They have to have compulsions, which are either physical or mental acts that are aimed at abolishing those thoughts, getting rid of those thoughts and feelings. And this is maybe the important criteria regarding your question, the preoccupation with the obsessions and with the compulsions has to either take more than an hour per day or cause significant distress or interfere with important life areas such as one's work, leisure, or relationship. Okay, and this is, I think, that the final criteria is the most important to distinguish between someone that is now really just naturally thinking over natural questions coming up in relationship, whether someone who obsess over them, or in other words, have ROCD.
Right. So I guess, tell us a little bit about what treatment. Well, actually, before we even get to that, when you start to have someone in the clinic who's expressing some concerns about their relationship and things like that, how, and through your experience, how is it that your clients find that they first start to notice that this is a problem, right? Where their questions about their relationships start to hit them as maybe this is abnormal, maybe this is excessive, maybe this is extreme in comparison to our aforementioned person who's just asking good and helpful questions about a relationship. So when does the individual who's experiencing the obsession maybe notice that it's excessive?
Right. So, of course, different people come to therapy in different stages, and sometimes for different reasons. But I would say that the great majority of people attend to therapy because they really suffer. They suffer justly. Now, ROCD OCD in general is a very heterogeneous disorder, right? And so is ROCD. There is no just one manifestation, and it can develop in all kinds of different phases and ways. And I'll just name a few. For some people, it feels like it was almost always there from the time they started engaging in relationships, and sometimes even beforehand. And you sometimes hear people coming to therapy and say, whenever I go on date, within 5 minutes of meeting the person, I'm already engaged in so many questions, so many deliberations, such as the ones we mentioned before. Right? Sometimes people are just didn't even meet the person. They're just let's say they're using some apps and still just look in the picture of the person, reading a few lines, and they're already highly obsessed about how it will be to have a life with him. Right? For other people, and this is really interesting, it's not at all rare to see people who were, in fact, for a long time, sometimes for years, in good relationships, okay? And at some point, which is almost always some transition point, ROCD erupted. And sometimes it can be like a full-blown ROCD. Right, and those transition points could be, for example, discussing about getting engaged, getting married, having a child, moving in together. Sometimes even taking a pet, taking a dog or a cat. And in the most cases, this is something, it's like that suddenly the person tells themselves, okay, now this is real. And it's not unusual to hear clients say, like, we've been together for 3 years, but there was always something in the back of my mind telling me, like, well, it's okay. It still can be changed. I mean, it's not the final word. It's not like something that I can still change my mind. And then there comes a point when suddenly, okay, now we are about to take a step from which there is no turning back. And that be a very significant trigger for the eruption of ROCD.
Right. When someone starts to kind of, well, I guess what drives this? I guess what keeps someone motivated to continue to obsess? We often hear within other subtypes of OCD, friends, family, some uninformed therapists say, well, just stop it, right? Just let it go, right? Mm-hmm. But what drives someone? I suppose the fancy term for it would be, what's the core fear involved with ROCD? What keeps someone coming back to this rumination, this worry?
Right. This is a great question, and I think there are a few aspects to approach this question from. First of all, people are really dealing with stuff that is very important for them. The idea of ending up with someone that is, I might be making a mistake, can be very, very frightening. By the way, just as a side note, people sometimes also obsess about breaking up with someone and then finding out, he was actually the one.
Mm-hmm, the regret afterwards.
Precisely. And by the way, it's not unusual to find people like fearing both ends. Like, what if I will stay with him and make them the mistake of my life, right? And what if I will break with him or her, of course, and find out I did a mistake of my life.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, it's kind of that worry of what if I make a choice that I simply can't undo, the irrevocable change.
Precisely. And you mentioned that the core fear, and this is actually something really important when working with people with ROCD, to dig deeper and say, like, what is the thing you're most afraid of when about making the wrong choice? And of course, this is very individual. And it's really important to be able to put in the person's own words. Mm-hmm. But my experience, many times, it is something around, as you already mentioned, like finding myself trapped in a choice in which I'm continuously suffering and sometimes even obsessing, and from which there is no turning back. Right? And again, there are many paths that could lead to this choice. One of them is making a mistake in choosing my partner. And then I often hear from clients, and 5 years from now, there will be children, there will be, we'll be married, there will be a mortgage, and so many things. I wouldn't be able to the prices of stepping out of the relationship would be so tremendous that I wouldn't be able to afford them. Mm-hmm. Right? And the outcome would be that every day I will, be obsessed, I will be suffering, I will be regretting my choice, and so on and so forth. And it could be a very different scenario, but with a very similar final outcome. I'm going to break up with them, and then realize that I really left the one person that really loved me, that truly wanted me. I will never find anyone who would love me and understand me the way that they did. And I will end up, all my life looking, searching, going from one relationship to another, just wanting to have those feelings again. And I will never find that. And I will end up every day eaten by regret what I did. And these are very distressing fears people cope with, right? And they lead them to engage. We're probably going to talk about this in a while, but engaging in various compulsions, which unfortunately, only make things worse. They don't really protect them or take care that they prevent from those fears from coming true.
Right. Oof. Yeah. And that worry of what if I make this mistake? What if I, in either direction? What if I make this choice? What if I find myself then stuck forever in this thing? I mean, that sounds terrifying. I don't think anybody wants to feel like they are stuck, or that they can never make any change, or that they're just going to now have to suffer. There's this element of saying, yeah, we kind of get, if there was an easy way to get out of that, an easy way to solve that and resolve that, we would do that. Mm-hmm. But the problem with OCD is that it keeps going back upon itself. And you think about it, and you think about it, and you think about it, and you feel like you get to an answer, and then that question comes back in. Yeah, you sure? Have you thought about it enough? Have you investigated every outcome? Have you investigated every characteristic to make sure? And it gets us going right back to the beginning. So it's a self-reinforcing cycle that is tough to break through.
Precisely, and also there is usually, or in many cases, this temptation, right? That if I only think about it long enough, if I only, really, really focus hard, I will get to this very clear and final answer, mm-hmm. right? It'll be like a whole solution, and I will really know, should I stay? Should I go? Right? Mm-hmm. And this temptation, again, pulls people again and again to this never-ending cycle of obsession.
Right. And a lot of the folks I talk to about with ROCD, and this isn't obviously everybody, but almost the perception with the compulsion is that there's like a just. If they would just do this, if I could just figure this out, if I just knew this little bit of information, then it would give them that certainty. But in a sense, it moves the goalpost. Once you've achieved that, even for a second, achieved that knowledge or that assurance, it says, well, that's not enough. You need to figure out something else more. Or that thing ultimately can't change. Sometimes it's, if my partner would just do this thing differently. Right. I guess another question would be, to what degree or can this be a worry about your partner, not just your individual feelings about that person? So in other words, the obsession about their appearance, their character, and for some folks this can be controversial, whether or not the obsession can be about whether or not their partner loves you enough. Can it go that direction too, from your experience?
Yeah, so starting from your last question, it could. In my experience, it is a less common manifestation of ROCD, but it definitely could. The more common, the two which are highly common is deliberations and debates regarding the rightness of the relationship, mm-hmm. right? And of my, feelings and experiences inside the relationship, and obsessions regarding the partner and all kinds of aspects of the partner. And this is, by the way, really interesting, because with some people, you can see that the focus of obsessions is like, something big, like, is he trustworthy enough? Mm-hmm. Is he, would he be successful enough in life? And in other manifestations, people can really, really focus on extremely minor details, usually, not always, but usually that had to do with the partner's appearance, right? And in some cases, it's not, some people can say, I really don't like I don't like their face, I don't like their body, but sometimes it can be focused on, a freckle, mm-hmm. right? Or the shape of their ears, mm-hmm. something minor that people find themselves, and I'm not exaggerating, can spend hours a day deliberating whether or not I will be able to live with someone that has this freckle over their nose. Mm-hmm. And this preoccupation is, again, usually accompanied by strong distress and anxiety, and can lead to endless deliberations and obsessions.
Right.
Right.
And that one little that little freckle becomes that hyper focus of the entire person's like categorization. Are they attractive or are they not? Do I find them attractive? Should I be with that person? And it's, if that damned freckle was just gone, they'd be an angel.
Precisely.
But alas, it's there. So
precisely. And this point, I think, eventually really, really connects to what you just said about the core fear, because if whenever I see my partner's freckle, I experience so much anxiety and I spend so much time obsessing. So, if tomorrow I'm going to marry them, this is how my life is going to look like. Like, because I'm going to see this freckle every day of my life, meaning I'm going to obsess, I'm going to feel anxiety, I'm going to feel distress, I'm going to feel shame about thinking about this every day of my life.
Yeah. You're living with your trigger.
Precisely. And this is the link between something that might from the outside seem so minor, like it's a freckle, between really triggers, really tackles into someone's very, very inherent deep fear.
Right. And it can be tough because it is the anxiety that is experienced with OCD. It is felt real. It is real anxiety, but based in something and so therefore we react as if it's a real danger, as if you actually see, the tiger on the hiking trail, or as if you're actually, on the edge of a cliff. It feels overwhelming, but the trigger is something that even to that person in their, heart of hearts goes, I know it's just a freckle and it doesn't make any sense. And people have freckles, and my brother's, spouse, or my, sister's cousin, whoever, they all have freckles and I think they all look fine. But my partner, they just look like a gargoyle. I think, are they a gargoyle? But I think they're attractive, but they're so ugly. It can be exhausting and feel irrational and maddening to the individual. That's so important.
Very much so.
Oh. So we talked a little bit about. Actually, I'll ask the question I wanted to ask you here. So, all right. For the vast majority of folks that I work with, and I'm just gonna extend that to you, and I assume everybody else in the entire world, because my experience is the same as everybody else's, right? For the most part, the people's relationships people who struggle with ROCD, their relationships are fine. They're fine. There often isn't something that is tremendously disqualifying within a relationship. But that being said, their rumination is often about, should I stay with them? Should I break up with them? How do I fix this? What should I do? Or is sometimes that. A question that I sometimes get is, well, can I break up with this person? How can I break up, or should I break up with this person? Because at what point are there things that are different enough, either in attraction or in just personal differences or values differences, that can be sometimes the focus of the obsession? At what point do they actually, at what point do they reach the level where someone can say, you know what, I am going to break up with this person, without their therapist saying, but is that an obsession? Should you be worried about that insignificant thing? I hope I didn't just muddy the waters and make that question too convoluted.
No. I think first of all that this is a really important issue, and with your permission, I might take a little time to elaborate upon that, because I think a few points we're going to touch here. First of all, I just mentioned it's not going to be the focus of thing that let's have in mind that sometimes we do meet individuals that struggle with ROCD, and there are also problems in the relationship. And those problems can be small, but they can also be large. There can be another partner struggling with OCD themselves, with anxiety. It's not very rare to see, or all kinds of other issues, which of course makes therapy more complicated. Okay, now, as to getting back to your question, I think that the first thing that is important to remember that our goal as therapists is not to decide for the client whether or not they should stay in a relationship. And by the way, if at some point during therapy we think like, oh well, I know better than them, I should convince them, so we should really stop and check ourselves, because it's not our job. This is not our goal, right? And we will probably never know better than the client whether the relationship is right for them or not. Okay. And I want to stress one more thing, that the aim of treatment of ROCD is not for a person to stay in the relationship. It's also not for the person to break up in the relationship. It's to have the client reaching a point when they can choose whether or not they wish to stay in the relationship. Okay, and in order to get to this to get to this choice point, right? Point where they can choose, right? They need, for first step, to reduce their engagement in compulsions, right? And I would even use this to say that, if I would have to describe in 2 sentences, what is the general goal of treatment of ROCD, I would say is taking a period of time in which one focuses on reducing engagement in compulsions on the one hand, and on the other hand, works on being present and invested in their relationship. And there are probably some more ground to cover here, but only this way they would eventually be able to actually answer the questions that are bothering them of whether or not this is the right relationship for me.
So it's at that point that they need to. I love the way you said it about choice. Getting to that place where they can make the decision on what to do. And I suppose within that, it's to make that choice without having that certainty, without knowing whether or not it's going to be the right decision, or whether or not it is, capital T, the right relationship. It's we don't know, but a re-engagement, an intentional choice to re-engage within the relationship, and to make it as best as you possibly can, if that's your choice.
Precisely. And maybe adding just 2 more things here, that first of all, let's have in mind that none of us, when we get into a relationship, actually have this assurance that this is the right relationship that's going to last for 20, 30, 40 years, right? We have thoughts, we might have feelings, might have our assessments, but is there any real, apart from romantic or Disney movies, it doesn't exist. And I mean, just look at the divorce rate, right? If you take many of the divorced people, for example, and you actually go back to the beginning of the relationship, you will find that there was love, there was trust, there were many things that made them think like, okay, this is the right one, and maybe somewhat said truth is we have no guarantee, which is of course true for almost every aspect of life. But I want to get back to the point you mentioned and just give, maybe one more example that I think that would clarify this. So let's think of for example, a person with ROCD that is going for a night out with his partner, right? Or even a date, a first or second date, right? And let's say they're going to watch a movie, and then they go ahead and grab some drinks, right? And for the entire evening, or for 90% of the evening, the person is constantly occupied with questions such as, why aren't we as happy as the couple in the movie? And do I feel excited enough? Do I enjoy myself enough? Do I feel attracted enough? What does it mean if I suddenly feel bored next to this person, my date or my partner, right? What does it mean if I feel anxious? And what does it mean if, I suddenly see another woman, for example, in the bar, and suddenly thinks like, well, she seems more sociable, maybe more intelligent, I might end up being happier with her, and so on and so forth. By the end of the evening, right? The person actually has no idea, no clue. How does it feel like? How is it to spend a night out with his partner? Because he wasn't there. He wasn't present. He was present to his thoughts, his fears, his deliberations, and this was his entire experience, right? And this goes back to what we mentioned earlier, that in order to start getting close to actually answering the question, is this person right for me? I need to take enough period of time of actually experiencing how is it to be with this person. Engaged, what we usually call being inside my head, right? All the time engaged with my thoughts, deliberations, fears. I'm not even actually gathering the data that I actually need to answer the question that bothers me. I'm mostly engaged with my fears and deliberations.
But they did have a wonderful romantic night out with their obsession. That sounds like a wonderful relationship they're in. All right, bad joke. But yes, they're not actually on the date. They're not actually with their partner. They're over in fantasy land, worried about that person or the future or the past or a potential relationship or potential relationships with all these other people or what would happen and blah, 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 blah. And it goes off, but not how do I get along with this person? And how am I engaging with the person that's right in front of me in the most positive, engaging, valuable, meaningful way?
Precisely. And if when you manage to be present, for example, on a date or a night out, so you can end up, let's say you can end up the evening and it's like things like, well, how was it? Well, it was interesting, it was boring, it was enjoyable. I mean, there were things that were compatible and so on and so forth. But if you're mostly inside your head, so how was it? It was scary, right? It was very stressful because I wasn't actually there. I was struggling with thoughts and fears and deliberations.
Yeah. And I find that sometimes you'll have, to kind of building on that, what that reminded me of are those clients or those folks who have ROCD who say, well, I don't feel like I love my partner, but I'm feeling all this anxiety. And this is someone who maybe historically speaking, they've been with let's say they've been married for 10 years and then all of a sudden this shows up. They say, I don't feel love for my partner. I'm just overwhelmed by anxiety all day. There's almost this sense of there's almost no opportunity to experience the feelings of love, as fleeting as they are, that feeling of love, because you're so preoccupied by chasing down and building your relationship with anxiety, right? There's almost no chance to feel the love because you're overwhelmed by anxiety. Anxiety is a real, killer of other feelings.
Yeah, I think you put it very accurately. Yeah.
Right. So, go ahead.
No, just maybe on the same point that, when you're constantly grappling with your anxiety, it's very difficult to be present in your relationship. By the way, in more extreme cases, people become unpresent in their lives. I mean, there's I'm not even with my partner. I'm at work, but I'm constantly preoccupied with thoughts about my relationship.
Okay, so can we shift a little bit then into talking about the role of mental compulsions within ROCD? It's a very, very common aspect of one of the ways that someone can experience compulsions within OCD. How is it that mental compulsions play a role within ROCD from your experience?
Okay, so this is such an important question that I see so many people with OCD in general, but with ROCD in particular, coping with. Can be very confusing and not easy to work with. Okay, so maybe the first thing to mention that compulsions. When we're talking about compulsions, again, we're talking about either physical or mental acts, right, that people do in order to get rid of their intrusive thoughts, get rid of their anxiety, find an immediate solution to the questions bothering them, and so on and so forth. And maybe let's just mention that there is sometimes the wrong idea. Some people have the wrong idea that if they don't do external compulsions or physical compulsions, right, or overt compulsions, then they don't do compulsions at all. And this is very much mistaken, right? Because mental compulsions are ones that we actually do inside our heads and inside our body. Right? For example, as opposed to going to the internet and checking for whether I'm in the right relationship, or calling up a friend, calling up a relative, and starting to discuss my relationship in order to get to the immediate answer: should I stay or should I break up with them? Which are examples of overt compulsions, right? And when we start discussing mental compulsions, we can start talking about automatic versus controlled aspects of our mind and of our experience. Automatic and controlled, or passive reactive. Okay? Now, there is one important thing to understand here. Intrusive thoughts, for example, are very automatic or very passive aspects of our thinking and our experience. Okay? However, and the same thing is true to feelings and emotions, right? For example, seeing someone attractive on the street and having, the immediate thought popping out in my mind, I might be doing a huge mistake while staying with my partner, is very automatic. We don't have control about it, right? And the same goes for the feeling of anxiety accompanying it. However, the active or the controlled processes are: what do we do? How do we act? How do we behave physically and mentally when those thoughts and those emotions appear? Okay? Now, let me maybe give a few examples that I think would make it much clearer.
Sure.
Okay. So let's stay for a moment with this example. Like, suddenly I see someone, or I see a loving couple on the street, right? And I saw, like, we will never be as happy as them. I might be making a huge mistake by staying with my partner. And I'm starting feeling anxiety, and I started feeling like a sense of urgency. I need to do something about it. All this process is completely automatic, right? But if I start bringing intentionally into mind all kinds of good things about the relationship, let me remind myself, the great vacation we had in Spain, and remind myself why did I even start dating her in the first place, and so on and so forth. If I start monitoring, to what extent do I feel love at the moment towards my partner, these are processes we can control. In other words, we can engage with them, but we don't have to. We can learn not to. I'll give you another example. Okay, let's say that you sit with your partner, and suddenly you realize that you are feeling bored. Okay, and then you're having the immediate thought, like, well, what does it mean if I'm feeling bored next to the one next to my love, or in true relationship, you're not supposed to feel bored in you, or you're supposed to feel excited. This is a very automatic process. But starting to get into, for example, comparisons, for example, about how the way I felt with previous partners, or comparing those feelings to the feelings I have when I see a colleague I'm attracted to at work, right? And started thinking how my life could have been so much less boring with that colleague. These are actions we have control over. Okay? And we can strengthen our ability to choose whether to engage with them or not. And if you let me, maybe one more example, okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. even in the sense of physical and sexual attraction, right? Let's say that, you come across a person that can be someone on the street, at a bar, in a party, at work, wherever, and you suddenly feel attracted to them, right? And attraction is actually expressed, actually accompanied by physical sensations, right? You can feel arousal towards them. All of this is a very automatic process. We didn't choose it. We didn't say like whether we wanna feel attracted. We just do. But if I, go home and start fantasizing about this person, whether sexually or thinking how my life could be with them, or starting to compare the sexual attraction I have towards them, the ones I have with my partner, and so on and so forth, these are actions, mental processes we can gain control over. And that's something very important to realize about mental compulsions. And some people, especially at the beginning of therapy, feel like the automatic and the controlled, or the passive and the active, are actually one. They're combined together. So like, well, I have no control over it. There is some trigger, and I'm immediately engaged in all those deliberations and comparisons. And I think maybe one of the most important goals we have as therapists is to help them distinguish, first of all, that there are two different aspects of the way our mind works here, and then starting to differentiate between the two, not just in theory, in the level of understanding, but learning how can they manage themselves differently when the automatic processes take place without necessarily engaging in compulsions.
Right. That controlled type of thinking.
Precisely.
Right. So with this, I suppose, what are some ways that can, I guess, do you think this would be a good time to jump into that question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's jump into that question. So I floated it out there to the interwebs to see if someone would want to have a question answered by Rand Littman, the Great and Powerful. So let's go to that question. So this question so it has a couple different aspects here, but it's related to what we're talking about here. So this comes from Adrian. So his question was, what are some tips regarding ROCD when there's not a lot of physical compulsions? It's all happening inside my head, and because of that, it can get hard to trust in the OCD diagnosis. Apart from internet searching, there isn't really a compulsion that gives me a temporary relief. And then they go on to say, now that my OCD is a bit better and I know how to handle intrusive thoughts, it feels as if they're, quote, gone. And with them being gone, it feels as though it might have been my own fault all along and not that of ROCD. I guess this fits into, I suppose, any OCD. So I think we can kind of split this up into two different parts for our conversation here. Perhaps that first bit. There's not a lot of physical compulsions going on. There's a lot of maybe mental things going on. So what are some tips regarding ROCD when there's not a lot of physical compulsions? I mean, there's probably a lot more mental compulsions going on.
Right. So first of all, this is a great question, and I can thank Adrian for bringing it up, because it's so relevant to so many people coping with ROCD. So I think that what we just discussed regarding mental compulsions is very relevant to what Adrian asks here, right? Mm-hmm. Because we have to remember, and unfortunately, there's something that, in my opinion, is not stressed enough, that the OCD diagnosis also refers to mental compulsive acts. And I could even say that, I've never seen a person with OCD that doesn't use mental compulsions. And I think that for the great majority of clients, the mental compulsions are, the majority and the core of compulsions they're using. And in many cases, they're often more difficult to cope with. Mm-hmm. Okay? As for some tips, so let me start by saying that again, there's no magic solution here. There's no anything you could give that someone tomorrow said like, oh, that's great. I'm totally rid of all my mental
You were
compulsions.
supposed to bring the fix, Ran.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, well, we'll have to disappoint our listeners here. But so the main thing to remember is like, first of all, that this is a skill that if you want to become good at this skill, you need to practice. Very similar to going to the gym, right? And this is something that cannot be built in a day or in a week, but requires continuous daily practice, right? Because if we want to change or start bringing a change to thinking and behaving patterns that usually people use for a long time, this cannot happen in a day, in a week, or in a month, right?
If I can interject just for a second to that, I got so excited when you used the word skill. It's a skill. It's not something that like a light switch that you're doing or not doing. It is a skill that we get better at, and it is a skill that we fail at. There will be times in the process of learning how to do this that you get sucked right back into the obsession. And when that happens, a lot of clients go, I just can't do it. It's like, well, because it's hard. And we stay at anything, pretty much anything worth doing, it takes some work to do. And you're not going to be good at it at the start, but like you were talking about, you consistently, persistently work at it and you get better at it. But there may be those times that you still get sucked into the obsession. So
precisely.
So I just wanted to I like the emphasis on the idea that we're building skills to get better at, not here's a thing, do this and you'll knock it out. There will be setbacks within the skill building process. Anyhow, I interjected. Go ahead.
Yeah, of course. I think it's again an important point to stress, and I often like to think of it as any other skill. You know, it's like learning a language, right? This is a hard thing to do. Your mind is not used to it, and it will always, or at least for a long time, want to go back to what it knows. Right? If tomorrow you go studying Spanish, your mind will always want it to go back to English, translating back to English, using English words, putting the phrases and the sentences in English, right? And the only way you could master Spanish is step by step, by gradual building the skill.
Right.
Going back to the question regarding some tips, so I would say that maybe the first thing and this really relates to our previous topic, we want to focus on is by starting to first of all, recognizing this transition phase between the automatic and the controlled, or between the passive and the active processes of our mind. Right, and if we go back to the examples we used earlier, is between having the automatic, for example, thought I might be making a mistake by staying with my partner and feeling this anxiety, and engaging in comparisons, monitoring of my feelings, calling friends to discuss, to deliberate the relationship, and so on and so forth. And so the first thing we want to become experts in recognizing those transition phases. And we want to start creating some temporal gap between the trigger and the automatic process and what do we call that response, okay? Or the control process we're engaging in.
Right.
Within this temporal gap, there are plenty of different techniques we can start building skills upon, or we can start practicing. And, as OCD specialists, we usually have a very wide toolkit of different tools and techniques we can practice with our clients. right? There's usually no one size fits all. Different people connect better to different skills, and this is to different tools and different skills, and this is fine. We want to have them, engaging and trying on all kinds of skills, all kinds of suits, and eventually building their own toolkits. Right. By the way, as you probably also experience, sometimes throughout therapy, the clients and us together, we invent new skills, right? Sometimes the clients take something we offered and make them and change it to make a new skill for their own.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, I could mention a few, right, that are often used in ROCD therapy, and of course this list is far from exhaustive. So one very important skill is the skill of attention focus.
Mm-hmm.
We all have our attention resources and capacity, and our capacity for attention is limited. And our attention can be easily caught by external stimuli, such as noises, such as someone calling our name, and by internal stimuli, such as our thoughts and feelings. Right? And one of the things we want to help clients, a skill we want to help them build, is the ability to focus their attention on what they choose, even in situations when there are very distressing thoughts and feelings. And by what they choose, I would mostly refer to being present. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And only one thing to note about attention training is not distraction. It's not about getting rid and not being attentive to the fact that I'm actually experiencing thoughts and feelings, right? Is acknowledging, okay, it's here. It might be very unpleasant. I don't want this to be here, but the fact that it's here, when I'm saying it's again intrusive thought, right, feeling of anxiety, etc., doesn't mean that I have to allocate all of my attention to it. Right? And if, for example, we go back to the example of the night out from beforehand, so I could have those, thoughts scratching in my brain. I could have this uncomfortable, anxious feeling, right? But I can still bring myself and let's be present with the person I'm with now. Let's be present in the movie we're watching. Let's be present in the conversation we're having, right? Let's be present in the interaction.
Right.
Okay? And there are all kinds of ways to practice and build upon attention training. There are recordings we could work with. There are many different methods to work with this. But this is a very fundamental, very important skill to build upon.
Mm-hmm.
Another method or another technique I could mention is allocating a specific time to questions and deliberations regarding relationship. Okay, and when I say allocating a specific time, I actually mean the person opens up their schedule and say like, okay, Wednesday from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, this is a time dedicated to whatever questions bothering me about my partner and about my relationship. Right, and it can be once a week and it can be every other day. Okay, but the important thing here is, first of all, after we allocated this time, right? So the other half, the other side of this coin is whenever those thoughts pop up outside of this time, you're telling them something like, "Oh, okay, I hear you. I'm going to relate to this, but not now. Mm-hmm. My reception time for you, for those kind of thoughts, is Wednesday at 7, right? I actually allocated time just for you. I'm gonna hear you. I'm gonna listen to you fully, but at this time I allocated.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And honestly, when people manage to do that, or when people manage to become better and better at this, they undergo a fundamental shift in the way they react to their thoughts and their feelings. From a situation of being what I like to call bossed around by your thoughts and feelings, whenever they pop up, I find myself having to engage to allocate my full attention and mental energy to them, to being the boss of your own time and of some of your the way you react to your experiences. Okay, I hear you. This might be unpleasant to feel right now, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to engage with it right now. I'm going to get back to it at the time that I chose. Right? And by the way, sometimes clients ask me, okay, and when we get to this time, so do we have to think about these thoughts? So, well, the answer here is no, you don't have to. If it still bothers you, right? Okay, go ahead. You have a full hour to engage, or however time whatever time you allocate it to it. You can engage with it. If you're not that bothered by it anymore, maybe sometimes you don't even remember what you were supposed to do with, fine. You don't have to. There will be another time allocated. Another technique I can mention is mindfulness practice, right? And when we discuss about mindfulness, because I know many different people refer to this term in different meanings. So maybe first of all, to note, mindfulness is not about relaxation. This is not a relaxation technique. It's not a technique. It's aimed to make people feel better, or in other words, get rid of thoughts and feelings. Vice versa. To me, to be mindful is, I would say, first of all, to acknowledge whatever happening to me, whatever kind of experience I'm having right now. Right? Whether this is, happiness, anger, shame, anxiety, whatever. Right? And the important thing here is, I would say, to place myself in an observing position versus a position that is reactive. Right? So, I can be mindful, I can be aware to the fact that, I'm having this unpleasant feeling at this moment, right? That says I might be making a huge mistake by staying with my partner. Okay, so this is my thought. This is a thought I have in my mind right now. One of thousands or tens of thousands that I'm going to have today. By the way, let's just observe it for a minute. Yeah. And I also notice anxiety. Okay, where is it? Let's try and be a little curious about this anxiety. Where do I feel it in my body? Where is it located? How does it feel like? Does it have a form? Does it have a shape? Let's just allow myself to stay with it. It doesn't mean that I like it. It doesn't mean that I enjoy it. It doesn't mean that I invited it. But it is here, and I'm giving up any attempt to change it or to get rid of it. Right? Which again, the more we practice this skill, it can lead to a fundamental shift in the way we manage in the kind of relationship we have with our thoughts and feelings. From something, the moment it pops up, we have to react to by engaging in compulsions, to a part of our experience as human beings, we can just observe and let it be there, even if we're not a fan of it.
Right. Yeah, it changes our perspective and our relationship with the feeling of anxiety and uncertainty and worry. To just being, a question, a thought.
Precisely. And maybe let's just mention maybe one last thing.
Sure.
Especially, in cases when people find it hard to disengage or not to engage or to not to conduct their compulsions, right? So sometimes try and use this temporal gap I was mentioning earlier to just, let's see if we can just postpone a little bit my in compulsion, if it feels too hard not to execute it at all. So let's wait 1 minute. If it feels too much, let's wait 30 seconds, 10 seconds, even 5 seconds, right? But start making this gap between the trigger, between the automatic part and the reaction. And with time, we can, enlarge and widen this temporal gap bit by bit.
Right. And that's another skill that we're talking about, in slowly building up our tolerance to not answering that question. And in the course of doing that, you're changing the relationship you have with this. And you're also changing, it broadens. It's not just your relationship with thoughts about your relationship. It's your ability to tolerate not engaging in just everything, but going back to choice. Where do I want to place my attention? Purposefully, intentionally. So you're regaining control. I'm putting this in quotes. No one can see this. Control over where your attention goes, because so often we hear, with obsessions, it just grabbed me, or I couldn't help but think about it. I had to do it, right? If I didn't, it'd feel terrible, or I wouldn't be. I'd feel uncomfortable and awful forever. Just by putting that little bit of space in there can help build your tolerance to having it. And sometimes we find as you practice your delay time, or what I call it, the worry time, when you're like scheduling in your time for worry, sometimes it gives you enough time to start noticing that natural arc of interest in a thought or interest in a question has already subsided. Mm-hmm. We're just trying to get up and over that hump, because every thought we have has this urge, oh, that seems interesting. And give it enough time, we become, in a sense, bored with it, and we become preoccupied with something else, whether or not it is something delightful or something horrendous. We get preoccupied with that. And great. We can kind of capitalize on our own ability to get distracted by showing ourselves not every single thought is worthy of our full attention. Sometimes we can let these thoughts pass on their own, and it'll come back, or it won't. But we get to choose where we're trying to place our focus. So I love all these techniques. And again, all these work well together, and they are all skills to start building. And not one of them is the magic bullet to recovery, or the magic bullet to discovering whether or not your partner is, quote, the one. It's a practice of being present with another person.
That's very well said. Yeah.
Tolerating the experience. Should we address the second bit here of this question?
I would skip it, actually.
No problem. I might address it a little bit later. But it's a little bit of a disconnect. But it's a bit of a two questions. So Adrian, we're going to skip that one just for now. But yeah. So let's see here. Let me check my notes. I think we addressed all of our points on here. So what is recovery for ROCD look like? We've talked about kind of what treatment looks like, and how we didn't get fully in depth about what treatment actually is. But what's the most positive outcome that one can have for ROCD?
Well, yeah, this is a good question. I will maybe mention that sometimes people, attend therapy with some kind of expectation that recovery means having no more of those thoughts and feelings. Mm-hmm. Part of our job is to, first of all, to disclose, which can sometimes be disappointing at the beginning of the way, that we cannot do anything to get rid of their unwanted thoughts and feelings.
Nope.
Right? Yeah, as therapists, we cannot even get rid of ours, right? So, if we don't know Spanish ourselves, how can we teach them to Spanish, right? What we can teach them, and this really goes back to the very important point you mentioned about choice, is to build certain kind of relationship with their thoughts and feelings in which they get to choose how they want to manage themselves in situations when they feel anxious or have unpleasant thoughts, right? And I would say that recovery in ROCD does not necessarily mean that the person doesn't feel any unpleasant thoughts, right? About their relationship, about their emotions, about their partner. It doesn't mean that they cease to experience unpleasant feelings and emotions, because part of being a human being is feeling unpleasant feelings and emotions.
It's part of life.
Precisely. But they can be present in their lives, in their relationship, in their work, in their sexual lives, in their intimate lives, and despite or alongside having those thoughts and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
We do see with, I wouldn't say everyone, but with many people, that with time, the less people react to those thoughts and feelings, to a certain extent, they might subside. They might become less frequent and less distressing. But, and this is very important, but we cannot make this a goal, because sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. And the big catch here, the moment it becomes a goal, we are very, very quickly slipping again into engaging in compulsions, right? Which are not feeling, having no unpleasant thoughts and no unpleasant feelings. But I do want to stress that it is very, very, many people with ROCD can have, after undergoing a beneficial therapeutic process, can have very significant and fulfilling relationships, alongside having periods when they, experience less pleasant thoughts and feelings.
Right. And what we tend to call that in the biz is being human.
Mm-hmm.
We're letting ourselves be human, and we're letting our partner be human too. They're going to have off days, and they're, quote, not going to look their best, because you're not going to look your best all the time, or be our best, or be our, follow our values as best as possible. We're human, and we're going to have those ups and downs. And kind of what we've been talking about here is, how do we change our relationship with being human and having anxiety and uncertainty and nervousness and attraction and notice differences? Yeah, our brain is designed for all those things. So we can let our brain do those things while we redirect back to our partner and try to be present and let ourselves have the opportunity for enjoyment, or the opportunity to experience the good stuff within that relationship. That date probably had a lot of good conversation, fun conversation. But man, if you're over here thinking about that, the person across the bar, that person from high school, you miss them.
Mm-hmm.
So we're letting life kind of happen while we choose where we put our focus. So I know it's a lot of random stuff. I know we're kind of getting to the end of our time today. Who'd have thought we were going to get through all this time? So is there anything else, in the sake of time today, is there anything else that you'd want to add at the end of this? Maybe to the person who's struggling with this, or even to the person whose partner has ROCD, which could be a subject of a whole nother episode. What's a bit of information or a bit of wisdom that you would offer somebody who's maybe in the middle of this struggle?
First of all, there is hope. When I'm conveying messages of hope, this is not to say that struggling with ROCD is going to be easy. No, this is usually challenging and difficult and process that certainly has its ups and downs. But this is not an unchangeable condition. There is a lot you can do to change your relationship with your OCD, with your thoughts and feelings, right? And this could be done in various ways. It can be done in starting, to learn about the disorder. There are all kinds of knowledge and even programs available online or in apps. It can be done through therapy, right? And it can be done through all kinds of paths. But this is not a sentence that one has to live with in its current form to the end of their days. And well, as you mentioned, being a partner of someone with ROCD can be highly challenging as well. And this is, I fully agree with you. This is a topic for a whole different episode we can discuss. I would say maybe two things. Try and be as empathic as possible. The fact that your partner is struggling, while refraining from engaging in their compulsions. For example, like giving reassurance and affirmation answers to their assurance questions, and supporting them in intending to either therapy online or self-help, or with a therapist that can help them fight their OCD effectively.
Love it. And yeah, this is perhaps we'll touch base in the future about doing a whole episode to talk about that. But Rand, I really appreciate you sharing all this information. Where can people find information about you and your writings?
Well, so as you mentioned, I do have my blog on Psychology Today magazine. So if you go to just Relationship OCD in Psychology Today, or just write my name, you can find those articles about ROCD. And and I'm available online through my LinkedIn account or through the Psychology Today blog.
Fantastic. Well, Rand, thank you so much for joining us for today to share your wisdom and experience with Relationship OCD.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you for this fascinating talk, which I really, really hope could help make a difference to people listening.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Thank you for listening to the Fearcast. If you would like your question answered on a future episode, please click on the Submit a Question link at fearcastpodcast.com. If you would like your question answered sooner, please send me a recording of your question to questions@fearcastpodcast.com, or by sending me an audio message through Instagram by DMing me at fearcastpodcast on Instagram. If you like the Fearcast, please write a review on your podcast platform of choice. Please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, please go over to fearcastpodcast.com and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.